to the man, the myth, the legend, somebody who's spent the last couple days with us, Curt Weldon. He is a former U.S. congressman out of Pennsylvania and the driving force that brought the Able Danger hearings into the public eye. This is one I have really been looking forward to. He is going to show you the actual charts that Able Danger identified many of these quote-unquote hijackers prior, tried to go to the FBI, and was completely stopped. Mr. Curt Weldon, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. It's a special pleasure and honor to be here again with good friends that I haven't seen for a few years who just came in to meet you all. I'm going to introduce them in a few moments, but I want to give you some of my thoughts first. I might offend some people, and if I do so, that's a part of who I am. So don't take it personally. I went to Congress as the youngest of 9 kids. I'm a teacher by profession and a volunteer firefighter. My whole life I was involved in the fire service. I became chief of my department, and 50 years ago in 1975, I was assistant chief on the largest fire in America. The collision of 2 tankers in my hometown. I wrote a book about it, and I was invited to testify before Congress, the House Energy and Science Committee, which I did, on the collision of the Edgar M. Queenie and the Corinthos. 28 people died. So I know something about disasters, I know something about fires. After leaving teaching, I went to work at the, as I told you earlier, the largest insurance company in North America, the INA, Cigna, and I was responsible for training all their technical people that inspected buildings and properties, high-rise buildings, buildings with high occupancy, life safety risk. I knew something about that. But I came to Congress with no political background. I did have a degree in Russian studies because when I was in high school, they offered Russian as a language, and I said, boy, that's interesting. They're our enemy. Let me learn something about these people. So I took Russian, and I went to college. They offered Russian as a major. And the professor there, who probably worked for the CIA, said to me, Dusan Glumats, Curt, you should become our first graduate. So my first undergraduate degree is in Russian area studies, along with education and political science. I met there a young woman who was at that time a state rep and became county commissioner named Faith Whittlesey. She was the first supporter of Ronald Reagan in the northeastern part of America. She nominated me for an exchange program with the Soviet Union. And I was sent to the Soviet Union with 10 other delegates, 5 from each party, for 2 weeks. We debated the young communist leaders. Today they run Russia. I know them all personally. They never believed in Marx and Lenin. They were there because they wanted the system to be able to help them get more. I brought them to America, and I debated them here. The mistakes we've made there I won't talk about tonight, but many of those mistakes are our own mistakes that occurred during the greedy Clinton years when Bill and Hillary were out for themselves, making money left and right by deals that they cut with Boris Yeltsin, who was our president. If you want to read something, get a copy of Time magazine, 1996 edition. The front page cover is Yeltsin's photograph. And the headline is, in Time magazine, how Bill Clinton ran Yeltsin's re-election campaign. It's a whole inside, in-depth analysis. We put our own people in the presidential hotel in Moscow to run the election. But my focus in Congress really, besides the Armed Services Committee, was in protecting people from dying in war. As the youngest of 9, 8 brothers and sisters, all serving in the military, that was my key priority. So on the Armed Services Committee, that's where I focused. All the problem areas. That's where I worked with Dennis. That's where I worked with Dana. And we traveled to 104 countries, all the problem countries. North Korea, Somalia, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Russia, Ukraine, all the bad places. Not to go there and shop, to go there and see if we could find a way to work together to build coalitions. And what I found in the 90s was I couldn't trust the CIA for the intelligence they were giving to me as a rising member of leadership on the Armed Services Committee. They would spin the intelligence. In other words, they would come to a conclusion in the case of the Clintons that they wanted us to take in the House. And I would get that information. Then I would get somebody like Bill Gertz, a reporter for the Washington Times on defense, and he would come to me and say, well, Mr. Chairman, I was chairman of the Oversight Committee for Research and Development and Procurement. I have this information. I said, where'd you get that, Bill? I got it from unnamed sources. Unnamed sources? You mean the CIA? Yeah. So the CIA was doing what's illegal for us to do in Congress. If we give away classified information, it's a felony. The CIA has entire teams that do that to manipulate the Congress. If you want to watch a video that made me sick to my stomach that I just saw for the first time 1 month ago, I'll send it to you. And this guy served under Donald Trump. And he was a congressman before he was the head of the CIA and our Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Did you see the interview? Did you see a statement? Did you see it? Mike Pompeo sitting in front of a group of men, laying back in his chair saying, you know, I went to one of the academies. In the academy, we had this procedure, this policy. We don't lie, steal or cheat. And anyone who does, we have to report them. But when I was CIA director, we lied, we cheated, we stole, and we had courses how to do that. Listen to it. That was Mike Pompeo, the head of our CIA, telling a group of people, laughing about it. That's not the CIA that I agreed to support in Congress. That's not the kind of organization. And I worked with good members of the agency to do good things. And I work with them all. Jim Woolsey, I work with all the Porter Goss, who was a congressman with us, all the members of the agency that wanted to do things to help our military and help us achieve peace, I was supportive of. But I became jaundiced by the information I was being fed. And so I had to find a way to get better intelligence. There was a group in Washington called the Cockroaches. The Cockroaches was a group of intelligence officers who worked for the NSA, the DIA, the CIA, the FBI, but they met socially. They would go to dinner, maybe once a week, once every couple weeks. They would have drinks, talk. They were all committed patriots, but they loved the country. And my staff was involved with the Cockroaches. So I went to a couple of their dinners. And I said, you guys are doing great work. Thank you. They trusted me. So they started feeding me raw information in the 90s. Information back when China was taking our technology. And that information came to me, and I was able to use it as a member of the Cox Commission to look at how China was getting this technology. And I wasn't getting that information from the CIA in formal hearings. So I began to rely more and more on this informer intel group. And I got to understand then that our services were standing up what were called information dominant centers, as we saw the evolution of IT come out and the whole threat of cyber attacks. The Army, Navy, Air Force each had their own program. The Army's program was based at Fort Belvoir, about 20 minutes from here. So I would go down there and I would visit them to see the kind of work they were doing. I did not ask to get right into the program. I could have. I had all the top clearances on the committee, but I didn't ask for that. I didn't need that. I wanted to see what they were doing because I had been at the World Trade Center in '93. Remember, I got the jacket there from my friend Ray Downey. And Ray told me one of the big problems was we didn't have good intelligence. And Ray was a Marine, had been a Marine. So I'm looking at this capability of the Army's Information Dominance Center at Fort Belvoir, and I said, you know, that's really impressive. I went back again. I met them. They were very responsive to me, and I had a couple of chances to test them. One was a trip I took with 11 members of Congress over to, with the State Department support, to meet with a Russian delegation to work out a positive solution to bring Milosevic out of office. When I found out the State Department was going to support me for this trip, and it involved 10 members, Dennis, you were on the trip, and so was Bernie Sanders, and so were 5 Republicans and 3 other Democrats. I called the director of the CIA, George Tenet. I said, the Russians are going to bring a Serb with me. Can you tell me something about this person that we're going to meet? He said, yeah, Congressman, give me till the end of the week. You're leaving Saturday or Friday, I'll get it for you. I hung up the phone and I called the Army's Information Dominance Center. One of the 5 that are now talking publicly. You're going to hear one tonight. I said, can you give me a profile of a Serbian family? Anything you want, Congressman. I said, this is off the record. This is not from the committee, it's for me. can you give me a profile of this Serbian family that the Russians are bringing with them in our meeting? They said, how much time do we have? I said, well, I'd like to have it as soon as possible. They said, can you give us 30 minutes? In 30 minutes, the Army's Information Dominance Center gave me 10 pages of information. When CIA Director George Tenet came back to me on Friday, he gave me one paragraph. I briefed the 10 members of Congress on the way over to Vienna to meet the Russians. But I realized we had a problem. We solved the solution, and we eventually got Milosevic out of office on the terms we negotiated on behalf and supported by the administration. But I then said to the intelligence people, we need this capability. So working with the intel folks down at Fort Belvoir and my friends from the Cockroaches Association, I said, help me plan an intelligence capability that's cutting edge to help prevent what happened to my friend Ray Downey at the 93 attack. And they did. That program was called the NOAH, N-O-A-H, National Operation and Analysis Hub, policymaker and warfighters tool to deal with emerging transnational terrorist threats. I called John Hamre on the phone, Deputy Secretary of Defense. Today he runs CSIS. I said, John, you got to go down to Fort Belvoir. You have to see what they're doing down there. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll go. He went down to Fort Belvoir, met with him. He called me and said, you're right, this is cutting edge. I said, we need this, John. He said, I agree with you. I said, I don't want another 9/11. I don't want another attack like 93 where we could have lost more lives. He said, I agree, and I'll manage it. Can you get it funded? I said, no problem. I'm the chairman of the Oversight Committee on all defense R&D. That's $180 billion a year. The committee will do whatever I want. Yes, I'll get it funded. He said, you have to convince the 33 classified agencies of the federal government to support this, but especially the CIA and the FBI. They're the big behemoths. So I suggest you convene a meeting in your office. So in my office on November the 4th of 1999, I had Dr. John Hamre, the Deputy Secretary of Defense under Clinton, myself, the Deputy Director of the FBI, Deputy Director of the CIA, I have all the names, and I handed them the proposal. And I said, we need this, I'll get it funded. John said, I'll manage it. And the FBI said, we love it. And the CIA said, we don't want it, we don't need it. That was 2 years before 9/11. I put language in 2 successive defense bills. You can check it, public record. Mandating a fusion center. This is not after 9/11, it's before 9/11. The CIA blocked it in each of the bills, never got through. 9/11 happens. I'm in my office in the Rayburn building, and my cell phone starts ringing, among all the other chaos. 4 specific calls in particular that I took. One was from the guy you're going to hear from, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer. The second was from Dr. Eileen Pricer, Career Air Force Intelligence. The third was Navy, Annapolis grad, Navy Commander Scott Philpott. And the fourth was the leader of the Land Information Warfare Assessment Center, Eric Kleinsmith. And they all had the same story, separately. We've got to see you right away, Mr. Chairman. I said, we're under attack. We have to see you now. They came to my office, one at a time. Scott Philpott was in tears as he told me that he was an Annapolis grad and they had identified information that could have prevented the attack on the USS Cole 3 weeks before the attack. But he wasn't able to get the information passed over. Then they brought the charts. It was Eileen Pricer who did all the analysis of the charts. That was her specialty. And they rolled the charts out on my desk, and you're now going to see the charts. The original charts are in this container here. They're not classified, so don't worry about being knocked off tonight. They had identified 2 years before 9/11 every cell of Al-Qaeda in the world by name and by face. There it is. 2 years before 9/11. And the second chart was a link analysis chart. The first chart was identifying all the cells. The second chart was the link analysis chart showing. So the 2 charts, they look like they were the same chart to me. One chart is the link analysis. The other is the actual showing of the all the able danger cells, of the allocated cells. You're going to hear from Tony tonight. He's going to tell you in much more detail about what I told you. You know what they did to Tony? He won't tell you this. They tried to ruin his life and his family. They tried to destroy him, took away his health benefits for his kids. They tried to destroy him as a career military officer, Bronze Star recipient. Is that what we do to our heroes? If you want to go online and Google the information about the Congress, you'll Google my speech that I gave on the House floor. Not this year, not last year, back then. And I said on the House floor in 1 hour speech, there's a scandal bigger than Watergate. A scandal bigger than Watergate. Not today, not last year, 20 years ago, while I was in Congress on the House floor. They were ruining Tony. Why? After 9/11, able danger ended, and Tony was sent back to Afghanistan to be a spy, as he was. And Zelikow went through Afghanistan, and they put the word out, if you know anything about 9/11, contact your commanding officer and meet with this team. Tony did that. He met with Zelikow. He said, I've got firsthand information. I was part of a special top secret unit, only 20 people involved. Zelikow said, I've got to see you when you get back. It's really urgent. Tony gets back to America. They took away his security clearances. They shut down his office. They locked his files and tried to destroy his life. I defended him on the House floor. Did other members defend him? Not really. I guess they thought I was crazy. This is 20 years ago, folks. This is not last year. It's not 5 years ago. It's when it happened. Tony then continued to serve in the Army Reserve. He went to his commanding officer. He wrote his book. Here's his book, Operation Dark Heart. He went to his commanding officer and said, as protocol requires, will you check my information? I don't want to get in trouble. Commanding officer said, it's okay, Tony, you can publish it. Publisher starts. The deep state found out. You know what they did? They used your taxpayer money. And they bought all 10,000 copies of the first edition with your tax money. Then they said to Tony, you can publish the redacted version. So I had Tony on a podcast a year ago when I first started talking. I said, Tony, you have the redacted version? Yeah. This one? And the original version? Yep, here. What was so sensitive that they didn't want you to talk about? What secrets were you giving up? He said, Congressman, they didn't want Zelikow's name mentioned in my book. This is traitorous activity, folks. Zelikow is not a protected asset for our country. He's a scumbag that ran the 9/11 Commission and made it a lie. They destroyed Tony Schaefer's life and career, bought the 10,000 books, and put the garbage out to the American people that didn't tell the story of what really happened. And they got away with it up until now. Up until now. Tony paid the price for that. And so did I. In 2000, I was next in line to be chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I had 150 generals and admirals send letters to me, including Donald Rumsfeld, including John Hamre. I have the letters. They wanted me to be chairman. I didn't want to jump over other members. I waited. 2005, my next election, I would have become chairman, but in the meantime, I took on the 9/11 debate. After 9/11 happened, I said to Rumsfeld, who had endorsed me to be chairman, you got to let the 9/11 people testify. Tony Schaefer, Eileen Pricer, Scott Philpott. No way. I said, Mr. Secretary, they got to testify. We got to know what went on. It's not going to happen. I got a letter signed by 250 members of Congress. Not 10 members of Congress, 250 members of Congress, demanding that Donald Rumsfeld and Dennis Kucinich and Dana Rohrabacher both signed the letter that Donald Rumsfeld allowed these brave American heroes to testify. They weren't allowed to testify. This all happened back while I was in Congress, while I was next in line to be chairman. So what did they do? They knew they couldn't control me. So in 2006, I'm running for my 11th re-election. All my elections were landslides. I'm a moderate Republican with my best friends. A lot of them were Democrats, like Dennis, Solomon Ortiz, Sylvester Reyes. I worked across the party line. I didn't play the game of politics. And Dana was the same way. 3 weeks before my election, 3 weeks, agents from D.C. were sent by Mueller and a guy named Sklamberg to my daughter's house in Philadelphia at 7 o'clock in the morning. They had all the cameras there. It was a national story. The vice chairman of the Defense Committee and the Homeland Security Committee must have done something wrong. They raided her house, carried the boxes out. No one ever talked to my daughter. No one. No grand jury subpoenas, no questioning, nothing. Nothing. And at the same time they raided my daughter's house, they raided a lawyer from my district, a Democrat. And the agents that went to his office in Philadelphia with the helicopters overhead and the dogs, this is long before Donald Trump now. The lawyer was working for FBI counterintelligence against Russia that I had arranged for the FBI 2 years earlier. So the FBI counterintel people went to John Gallagher's office and said, don't answer any questions. We don't know what's going on here, but you're doing work for the government. So when the agents from D.C. came in, the counterintel people sitting in his office said, don't answer anything, John. And John said, I have nothing. What do you people want? And they said, first question, Mr. Gallagher, isn't it true that you're related to Congressman Curt Weldon? And John started laughing at them. He said, you're from the FBI, and you drove 2 hours to come to my office, and the first question you asked me is the stupidest thing in the world, because Congressman Weldon's wife's maiden name is Gallagher. Am I related to Congressman Weldon? I have no relationship to Congressman Weldon. I knew who told them that. And I'm going to bring that all out because it was a deliberate effort to raid my daughter's house. The person they were thinking about was Hank Gallagher, my relative, who's a lawyer from Delaware. They were in such a rush that Seymour Hersh eventually verified to me at the request of Dennis Kucinich when I met with Cy Hersh 5 years ago. He said, Congressman, they wanted you out. He said, Brennan Clapper went to Mueller and said, do us a favor, disrupt Weldon's election. He said, but you have to understand, Congressman, I verified all your facts. But it was done during a Republican administration. I said, I know that. The people around Bush wanted me out just as bad. My message to you folks is we got a problem, and it's both parties. I lost that election that year, and nothing I could do. People thought I had done something wrong. My daughter maybe had done something wrong. And then ironically, folks, I know you won't like this tape, but I want to show it to you. Please play the 3-minute tape. This was done weeks after they raided my daughter's house. All the national headlines said, Weldon must be some kind of a bad person. Please play the tape. It was at a national dinner in Washington where I organized all the firefighters in the country with the Congressional Fire and EMS Caucus. We have an annual dinner, done 37 of them. And so this was a tribute to me that they arranged after I was out of office. And so this videotape shows up. The CIA tried to take this down 4 years ago, and they couldn't do it. It's all over the internet now. This was done by George H.W. Bush after they raided my daughter's house to get me out of office because of 9/11. Because I would have done hearings with subpoena power. So everything you're talking about now, 20 years ago, would have been in hearings. 20 years ago. So this video played, and I wasn't aware it was even done. And, you know, there are senators and House members there, 2,000 people. It was in the Washington Hilton. And I've never seen George Bush do a video tribute like this for any other member of Congress, which takes away any CIA or media person who says, oh, you listen to Weldon, he's a crazy person. Well, you ask them to show you who else George Bush made this kind of a tape about after they left office. So the point is, folks, the 9/11 story is a very personal one for me. I know it's been hidden. I said publicly many times, the 9/11 Commission was a fraud. Not the commissioners. They weren't privy to the facts. That was controlled by Zelikow and Gorelick and a staffer named Dieter Snell. They controlled everything. They wouldn't even let me testify. Here I am, the firefighter leader of the whole country. I'm the chairman of the fire caucus. Every organization in the country, not just a few, the fire chiefs, the union, volunteers, all of them. I won all their awards. I've been to all 50 states, and they wouldn't even, and I was at the World Trade Center in '93. I was at the World Trade Center at 9/11, and they wouldn't let me testify. Why? Because they knew what I would ask. They had to get me out as vice chairman of the committee. The point is now, you want to tell the truth, and so do I. And when I talked to your folks in January, when I decided to go public, I said, but you've got to build a bigger base than what you have. And I got to be a little honest with you. Now, you've made a big case about the Alaska study. If you've really done your homework, why aren't the two senators from Alaska supporting the University of Alaska study? Tell me. I mean, tell me. Firefighters, where are the Alaska firefighters? Why aren't they going to the University of Alaska and supporting them? If you're not going to do that work, you're not going to win. It's not about rhetoric. It's not about paper. It's about motivating. When I couldn't get, after the Murrah building attack in Oklahoma, here's George Bush. Let's listen to him.
Good evening to all of you. In 1989, I had the honor of addressing this audience at the first annual National Fire and Emergency Services Dinner. I can recall looking out at the audience and seeing over 2,000 fire service leaders. It was an impressive sight, to say the least. And now, as President of the United States, I naturally assumed that the audience was there to hear me speak. But the following year, you packed the ballroom again, as you've done year after year. Why? Not so much to hear from presidents or vice presidents, but to hear from your leader of the past 20 years, Curt Weldon. You often heard Curt speak of the fire service as the sleeping giant. When I was president, if it appeared that I wasn't giving proper attention to your issues, I could always be assured of a phone call from Curt. I am sure the other presidents would all say the same. To his credit, the fire service was never a partisan issue. It was a personal issue, based on his own experience as a volunteer firefighter. He's the reason why both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue have heard the fire service's voice and answered so many of your calls. He's the reason why you, the Fire and Emergency Services, was awakened 20 years ago and has become such a political force in our nation's capital. It's the goal of every political leader who is blessed with the opportunity to serve the public to leave behind a legacy that in some way makes our nation stronger, better, and safer. Curt, you've done just that through your dedication and your commitment to our nation's 1 million first responders. So on behalf of Barbara and myself, thank you for your 20 years of incredible service to this great nation, and best wishes as you begin a new chapter in your life. Thank you, and may God bless America.
You need to understand to win this battle, and I'm here to help you. You got to have a strategy that's doable. Here's the strategy, and I gave it to your people in January. And I gave this speech in California when I spoke, the keynote speech to the California fire chiefs 1 year ago, 800 of them in the room. I said to them, stop sucking up the political parties. The Democrat Party and the Republican Party are each around 40 to 45% supported, depending upon their candidate. Police are around 50 to 55% because some people want to defund the police. I don't. I'm a big supporter of police. Some people want to defund the military. So that's around 55%. In every poll, in every state, firefighters and EMS are 98% supported. 98%. Do you know how many fire departments there are in America? 33,000. Do you know how many fire stations there are in America? 55,000. 55,000 organizations in every town. They're not Republican, they're not Democrat, they're not MAGA. They're the people who make the country strong. They don't just fight fires. It's the hall where you vote on election day. It's the hall you rent when you want to have a wedding reception. They're the people that rescue the cat in the tree and pump the cellar out when it's flooded. They organize the July 4th parades, Memorial Day celebrations. They're the backbone of America. If you have them behind you, you win. When I organized the fire caucus in 1987, people laughed at me. It grew to 370 members. My co-chairs were Joe Biden, Al Gore, John McCain. Why? Because I'm a firefighter. Your biggest power to get your message across is to motivate the firefighters in this country, which I'm doing, and I'm doing it to help you. I came out with a strategy a year ago that I'm right now very close to getting fully funded. It's called Fire EMS 290. It's a part of One World for Life. And I haven't made a dime of money. Everything I've done, I'm spending on my own money. The fire service has problems today. We talk about America's problems. I'm talking about the firefighter problems. 85% of our fire companies in America are volunteer. They don't get paid like the one I belong to. They're having trouble getting new recruits. So you know what we're doing? We have a task force. And that task force is going to focus on an educational program from kindergarten to 12th grade. The fire department of New York has a whole high school that has a curriculum for kids that want to become firefighters in EMS. I want that to be used free for every school district in the country. So the Rendell Center is working on that in Philadelphia. The second part of that is a program to give the same thing we do for veterans with New Day, run by Admiral Lynch. I went down and met with Admiral Lynch in Florida. We give discounted mortgages for veterans. I want to give discounted mortgages to firefighters. I want to give discounts to department stores. You know, they give 10, 20% if you belong to a service to the community. I want Donald Trump to have a gold card. If you're a firefighter or an EMS, you get 15 to 25% off of everything in a hotel stay, in a restaurant, because you're protecting the community. Doesn't cost the taxpayers a dime of money. Just needs to be organized. The third task force, the union will lead. Health, safety, and welfare. Firefighters are concerned about health, about cancer, about hepatitis C, about burns. So I said to Ed Kelly, the president of the union, a good friend of mine, Ed, where are you getting the money from to help do this research? Well, we're going to NIH. I said, NIH, you know how big their budget is? It's like that. Do you know who the biggest funder of healthcare research in America is? Take a guess. Department of Defense. The Department of Defense has whole bases that do nothing but military research for soldiers. A burn on a soldier is the same as a firefighter. If you go right down the road, you've got Fort Detrick. That whole base is on healthcare. So I want Donald Trump to appoint a commission to open up the research being done for our soldiers for firefighters. It doesn't cost any more money. A fourth task force is to deal with wildfires and natural disasters. And the California firefighters are all over that because stupid idiots like the governor out there, who's a moron, took the resources away to cause the wildfires to go out of control. And what did they do? When the fire chief of Los Angeles was interviewed by the media, the person in the interviewer said, your budget was cut by 20%, chief. Did that hurt you? The chief was a female. Female. You Democrats, not in the room. She told the truth. You know what they did? The mayor of Los Angeles fired her. I call for that mayor to be shut down immediately. She should be fired. The fire chief did her job. Who came out to rescue her? No one. The firefighters are the backbone of the country. They're what makes America great. Other people can talk a good game. The firefighters, men and women, are delivering every day. And there are 55,000 organizations in your community. Every one of your towns have them. In New York, there are 300. In D.C., there are multiple. If you get them behind you, it's all over. All of your questions and all of your issues are going to be resolved. The seventh task force is a 13-story tower being built on New Jersey Avenue over top of the existing fire station. And the first 4 floors will be a national museum. There is no museum today for firefighters in EMS. That will be there. The upper floors will be offices for the fire groups. And the last task force in California, not the last, the seventh, is a training center. Do you know we don't have an international training center right now or domestic for firefighters in EMS? We don't have one. The states have them. Texas A&M has one, Maryland has one, but they're not of the right quality. I have an investor that's donated 120,000 acres in California, and I've got the funding for it, not government money. We're going to build a state-of-the-art training and not just a training center, but a center to use AI to simulate building collapses, to simulate tidal waves, floods. It's about time we give our first responders the tools they need. But for you and for Donald Trump politically, he's going to love this, which is why I'm pitching it to him, but I want him to do the task force that you all want, which is 9/11. There's one more. And this came from my visit the last 2 weeks to the New York Fire Department. I was up there with my friend, the deputy chief. Very emotional day. The deputy chief of New York for rescue today is Joe Downey. His dad was Ray. He hosted me for lunch with all his firefighter buddies at rescue headquarters on Manhattan Island or on Roosevelt Island. You know what he did? He brought his 25-year-old son with him. His 25-year-old son, Joe Jr., is a firefighter. Joe Jr. was 4 years old when his father brought him down to my district 1 month after 9/11. And so there I was standing with Joe Jr., the chief of rescue for all of New York, and his son, or Joe Sr., Joe Jr., as we shared lunch together. They proposed that we have an EMS task force. What I'm saying to you is the solution to what you want to do is not just about the technology, not just about all the great work you're doing, the legal work, the healthcare work, the architects and engineers who've done a fantastic job. You've got to build a base of the people who make America move. When I couldn't get the Congress to come up with an interoperable communication system after the Murrah building attack in Oklahoma City, and Chief Marsh came in to testify, or the first 9/11 attack at 93, I went to my staff, I said, why don't we have one communication system for emergency service, interoperable? Because some were on high band, some were on low band, some were digital, some were out. And they said, oh, you can't do that. Why? Because the big communication networks are blocking frequency spectrum for first responders. I said, you're kidding me. So you know what I did, folks? Take this message. I put the subtle word out. Hey, friends in the fire service, can you bring me 20 or 30 fire trucks to Washington on a Wednesday when we're in session? Wednesday afternoon? We're in session. My staff comes and said, Curt, you won't believe this. There are 300 fire trucks at RFK Stadium. 300 fire trucks pulled into RFK Stadium in the parking lot. I grabbed Steny Hoyer off the floor. Steny's a good friend of mine. He was co-chair. And this is the way Steny answered me. He said, you crazy bastard, Weldon, what are you doing now? I said, you just come with me, Steny. I'm going to put you up in front of a fire truck from your district, from Maryland. We went down to RFK Stadium. I put Steny up in the front seat of his truck. I got up into one of mine. We paraded down Capitol Street. We went down Independence Avenue, and we went down Constitution Avenue. And I had them park the trucks at 12 noon. I said, when I give you the signal, you lay on the air horns and sirens. At 12 noon on a Wednesday, session day, 300 fire trucks around the Capitol building with the 2 ladder trucks raised in the center parking lot that the Chief Ray Alford had approved for me to put there. He put them there, his trucks, with a flag, and then we had a flatbed trailer with a microphone. When those sirens and air horns went off, every building emptied. And all the members ran out. You know, a member of Congress can smell a microphone a mile away. And they all start running over and see Steny and I up on the podium. It's all in the book I wrote. And they said, what are we here for? We're here to demand interoperable communication. They jumped up on the stage. You'll see it in the book. You'll see it in the video of it. We got the system. You know what that's called? AT&T FirstNet. That didn't happen because AT&T hired lobbyists. It happened because we took control of the system. The system can work if you make it work. If you lay back and talk about commissions and reports, no. You've got to make it work. And sometimes you've got to make some waves. And what I want you to do, and I'm here to help you, is I want you to make some waves. You've made some waves now. Now we got to make some more waves. And I want you to get every fire department. This document that you prepared, you did an outstanding job. I want every firehouse in America to have that document. 55,000 firehouses, you have to deliver that document to them saying, we're doing this for you. What I'm doing, I'm raising the money for their 8 task forces. Now, let me give the ultimate. This is my close. You're probably saying, I'm glad you're closing, Curt. But once I get going, it's tough to stop me. And Ted's back there, give me the sign. You know, next year's the 250th anniversary of America. You know that. Big deal. Donald Trump's talked about it. We celebrate the Army, 250 years. Wait a minute. Next year is the 290th anniversary of the first fire company. Did you know that? Ben Franklin in Philadelphia started the first volunteer fire company, Union Hose, in Philadelphia in 1736. 1736. So next year is the 290th anniversary of the American Fire Service. 40 years older than America, 40 years older than any service. People came together and said, we've got to protect our friends, our families, we've got to have an organization. They started out as volunteers, many are paid now. 80% are still volunteer, 85%. If we ignite that group of people, we will shake the CIA's walls, and if they take me out, and I've said this publicly, and I'll say it again, take me out, buddies, and we'll surround CIA headquarters with 600 fire trucks. Thank you.